What's up, YouTube? It's Crypto Clay here, and tonight we have an awesome discussion. So tonight, I would like to welcome my buddy KJ to the conversation. We're going to be talking about market manipulation and Bitcoin futures. It's a really hot topic right now, especially on places like Reddit, and other really smart investors are talking about it as well. And because of the week that we've had and the closing of the first futures contract that we've had this week, I thought it would be a really awesome topic to talk about. So KJ, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show tonight and talk about this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'd like to start off the stream by saying that KJ and I are not experts in this field at all as far as Bitcoin futures go, or any futures for that matter. We're going to be discussing things that, we've learned just by reading online. And so anything that we say is not considered financial advice, and I don't encourage anybody to take what we talk about tonight as financial advice. So yeah, I just thought I'd get that out of the way first. Let's see. Evening, what's up? All right. So let's begin the conversation, KJ, by just discussing exactly what these Bitcoin futures are. Because I think a lot of people misunderstand what these futures actually are and what they hold and what is actually in the contract themselves, how they can be traded, things like that. And based on what we talked about earlier, KJ, just go ahead and wrap up in your own words, like what we discussed Bitcoin futures were to us.
Okay. So generally, what I view the futures as is just a ability for people to legitimately, in a legitimate market that's not a cryptocurrency exchange, basically get involved in the crypto market by just basically placing bets on where the price of Bitcoin will be at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And so what that allows is people, large money institutions are going to be a lot more comfortable using these futures contracts than using some crypto exchange like Coinbase or even Gemini. I just feel like that's where they're more comfortable because they deal in that in their everyday business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about this earlier, how important it was to understand that all of this is paid out in cash. None of this ever touches Bitcoin, right?
That's correct. These are cash settled futures, which essentially means that there is zero transaction of actual Bitcoin. It is purely basically a contract that's like essentially a wager on where the price of Bitcoin will be in the future. However, as we discussed, there is no Bitcoin held by these commodity exchanges either. All they're doing is tracking the price from one date to another.
Yeah. That's literally all Bitcoin futures are, guys. That's actually any futures market. You take a look at the housing market futures, you take a look at gold futures, you take a look at any oil futures, any of these futures markets, you take a look at them. The thing that you need to understand is that it is all based on nothing. Like, it's literally just a wager between you and a bank saying that you think the price of something is either going to go up or down. You can short the market or you can long on the market. And it's just a wager. It's a contract that states, I bet in this direction for this specific market. So yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way first, just so that everybody in the audience understands what futures are before we actually begin discussing what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, KJ, for you, whenever you heard that they were going to be launching these CME Bitcoin futures. What was your initial reaction, and what did you think it would do for the crypto market itself as a whole?
So when this was first announced, it didn't register as that big of a deal, other than I felt like it just added legitimacy to cryptocurrency. Every little incremental step towards more mainstream adoption and more legitimate viewing by the investor public, to me, is important. And that's where I thought that futures were going to be important, that it was going to add legitimacy to investing in Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same exact thing whenever I first heard about it. I was like, if banks are starting to invest in cryptocurrencies in any form or fashion, you know that you're doing something right, because they're in the market of making money. And if they think that there's a potential for them to make money on a market like this, then you know you're moving in the right direction. And so when I heard that, I was initially really happy, but once I started thinking about it, there are many reasons to kind of be upset about it as well. Like what are some things that you can think of as to why it's a bad thing to have the banks in this market?
So yeah, that's now, in my opinion, has been something that's kind of been coming to light here in the last week, is that prior to the futures, really the only way to make money on Bitcoin was essentially to get involved with exchanges and actually buying Bitcoin itself and then hoping that it goes up. Now, I know that there's exchanges where you can take short positions on Bitcoin and stuff, but I don't want to get into that because that still is truly trading Bitcoin still. But the only real way you could make money, like good money on Bitcoin before, was to buy it, hold it, and trade it. And now this has brought up a whole other thing where now there's an easy incentive for big money to get involved and mess with the price. And with the idea that the only way previously to kind of continuously make money on Bitcoin was to buy it and have a stash of Bitcoin, now all of a sudden they have a way, the big money players have a way to say, I bet that the market of Bitcoin will go down by this date from this date. And all of a sudden now they have this pool of Bitcoin that they can now sell into the market and push the price down. Because comparative to these large money institutional pools of investor cash that they have access to, the crypto market is just such a small market cap.
Absolutely.
And so they can really move things around when they decide it's time to move things. And that's my opinion of what we're seeing in the last week, is because there was an incentive in that one of the futures contracts was closing. And maybe you can talk about why it's important that the contract closed on the 17th.
Why it was important?
Yeah, why that date was important, and then the market activity in front of that.
Okay. I don't know what you mean by that specific date.
Because the CBOE Bitcoin future contract for January closed on January 17th.
Right.
And so with the idea in mind that some of these big money players already might have thought that the price of Bitcoin would go down and they were sitting on a stash of Bitcoins, they could start pushing Bitcoin prices down by selling those before that contract closed, so that if they were short on the futures contract, they would be making money off of that futures contract. That's kind of what we had discussed a little bit beforehand.
Yeah.
What our kind of theory was.
Yeah, I just thought you were insinuating something about like the 17th in some other fashion. I wasn't sure what you... No. Yeah. No, I completely get what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, so essentially what KJ just said is that some of these banks probably have their own bankroll in Bitcoin just sitting there waiting to be sold to manipulate these futures markets as well, because these futures markets take a look at the actual Bitcoin market, guys, and follow the value. With the CBOE, here, I'll just pull up this this little thing that you sent me, KJ. With the CBOE, oh, everybody can't see that. Okay, let's take a look at this, guys. The CBOE Bitcoin futures follow the value of Bitcoin on the Gemini exchange, but the thing about that is the market is manipulated by any large exchange that has high liquidity. So any of the larger exchanges like Coinbase, GDAX, Poloniex, Bittrex, Binance, Gemini, anything like that, Bitfinex, if the value of Bitcoin gets affected on any one of those exchanges, it affects the value of the entire market. And so it's important to take a look at CBOE Bitcoin futures and realize that it only follows the value of Bitcoin on the Gemini exchange. However, taking a look at these CME Bitcoin futures, it follows the value of several exchanges, and it just takes the average of those exchanges. But again, you know, the market is going to be moved on any of these exchanges based on other exchanges' values as well. But what we were discussing was the fact that these banks can essentially take their Bitcoin that they have in reserves, sell them to make a panic based on other people's emotions, because whenever other people see a large sell order go through on an exchange like this, they begin to panic sell based on their emotions, and it drives the value down tremendously. And so there's speculation in the market that this is exactly what banks have been doing. They have been driving the price down by selling large amounts of Bitcoin that they had in their reserves so that they could settle these Bitcoin future contracts at a much lower value and essentially short the market. Did you have anything to add to that, KJ?
Nope, that wraps up pretty much what's going on here, I believe.
Yeah, me too. KJ and I are pretty much in agreement when it comes to what exactly is happening with this. But that about wraps up what we believe is going on with that. But let's talk about a few other things. So, in your opinion, where do you think the futures market is headed? And do you think the volume will rise with more capital investors? Or do you think it's going to kind of stay the same?
I honestly believe that the futures market is going to continue to increase in volume as more and more people see that there's money, real money to be made here on betting on the price of Bitcoin. Because one thing we all know is that Bitcoin's price is volatile. And in my opinion, you hear this all over the place. One of the major things that traders and hedge funds want in a market is volatility, because they can make money with it going both ways. So they don't even care which direction it's going as long as its prices are moving significantly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you are under the assumption that volume is going to rise and more capital investors are going to join the market. I am under the same impression. I think that, you know, the more people realize there's money to be made here, they're going to flood in just like any other market. But yeah. So
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So one of the interesting things that I think about this is that the key thing to keep in mind is none of this big money has to spend a penny on a Bitcoin itself. And so there's a really interesting thing here, and I don't have the answer. I have no idea what impact this is really going to long-term have on the price of Bitcoin. But one of the interesting things to me is that Ah, basically, that Bitcoin it might end up following the futures market rather than the futures market following Bitcoin, because we kind of all know that right now in the crypto market, at least in my opinion, I guess I shouldn't say we all know. In my opinion, in the crypto market, tiny things like announcements of possible news shift the market so crazy that if you all of a sudden see that the futures contracts are either way lower or way higher than the current day price of Bitcoin, all of a sudden now it's like, well, is the market of Bitcoin cryptocurrency going to follow the futures market?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and there are definitely other markets that we could take a look at to determine if that's a thing. Like futures have been around forever,
Yeah.
and we could definitely do a study on other markets to determine if that could happen with this market, because it really doesn't matter what you're trading on speculation as far as futures goes. All futures contracts are the same. I'm either betting for or against this market. So yeah, it would be interesting to take a look at some of those other markets that have shared futures contracts like this.
Yeah, it would be.
Um,
Definitely not something I've done yet, though.
yeah, no, I'll have to take a look at that as well. That's really interesting. Um, Okay, do you think that this is going to be cyclical, or do you think this was a one-time deal?
I personally believe that this is going to happen again to the downside. But I don't know how much longer, because at some point, I really believe that there's going to be an upward push of all of this. There's going to be a lot more long contracts opened, and there's going to be a lot more, you know, generally people investing in Bitcoin. I just think that the overall trend is more users, more investors, more people flowing into the space. You know, for most of these coins, the supply of coins is not going up anywhere near the amount of people coming into the market. And so there's at some point there's going to become a tip where the demand for these currencies are going to far outweigh the supply of them. And to me, that just automatically leads to a price increase.
I agree. I think long term, Bitcoin is going to go up in value. However, right now, I think you're right. Especially with the first CME. So let's talk about the CME futures closing next week. Let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think? And guys, before we talk about this, before KJ and I discuss this, I just want to say again, this is not financial advice. This is the opinion of two people that are not experts. So, yeah, KJ, what are your thoughts on the CME futures that are closing next Friday?
Sure. So one of the important things that was just on that chart that you had up before is that the CBOE Bitcoin futures is 1 Bitcoin per contract, and the CME futures is 5 Bitcoins per contract. So one of those exchanges is significantly larger investment than the other. And so if you're a investment firm and you want to get involved in this and you've got a big pool of liquidity, you're not going to be messing around with a bunch of 1 Bitcoin contracts. You're going to go in and you're going to buy a bunch of 5 Bitcoin contracts. And this big price drop, if you adhere to the theory that Clifford and I are discussing, that this big market drop was caused because people wanted to push the price down because big money was short the Bitcoin market in the futures, so they could make money on the way down. That was the small futures that just closed on the 17th, which the market kind of started to drop about the 14th. So the CME Bitcoin futures, their close date is January 26th for the January futures. Now, I am personally kind of buying into the idea that the larger contract is going to be a much larger incentive to push the prices down of the market. And I say the market because, in my opinion, Bitcoin just drives everything. The direction that Bitcoin goes, the rest of the market goes with. Not every single coin, but like 95% of coins follow on a day-to-day with Bitcoin in a kind of meta level.
Yeah.
And so to me, I am personally kind of starting to get the feeling like there is a high probability that we might see another push downward in the market due to the large contracts closing on January 26th.
I completely agree. And guys, again, this is not financial advice. I am not telling you to hold off on buying Bitcoin. That's not what I'm trying to say. However, KJ and I will not be purchasing any Bitcoin over the next week, just because we think that the value of Bitcoin is probably going to drop lower. And honestly, if it drops below $9,000, which is what I said before in one of my other videos this week, I think we could see potential lowers around $6,000. So you want to take a look at the market and keep an eye on that $9,000 mark. It's a very, very important support. But if you are thinking about shorting the market this week, still be incredibly careful. I think that anything can happen in this market. We're still in the Wild West. However, it makes sense to KJ and I that banks would want to continue shorting the market with these futures contracts. And in order to do that, in order to make the most money, they would want to drive the value of Bitcoin down as much as possible. So what we're thinking is over the next week, large banks with any Bitcoin holdings are going to be selling off as much Bitcoin as possible to cause more panic in the market.
And one thing I want to add to that, just to kind of pick up on something you said, as much Bitcoin as possible. That might not even mean as much Bitcoin as it is possible for them. All they have to do is get the ball rolling.
Yep.
And then so many people like Darren just said in chat, if it drops below 9,000, then there'll be so much panic. That's right. All they have to do is give it a little shove down to that range, and all of a sudden you get people with short positions or long positions getting liquidated. You get stop losses hit, and you just start this cascade effect. And then it just builds the fear, and more people kind of get scared and get out. And I don't know. I'm of the impression that over the next week, we might be in for a pretty significant push downward.
Absolutely. I mean, just thinking about it myself, if I were a banker and I was just looking to get as much profit as possible, that's exactly what I would do. I would try and get my hands on as much real Bitcoin as possible and sell it.
And that's kind of what scares me about this little run up, because it feels like that might be what's happening. Like, it feels like this little rise in price over the last 2 or 3 days has been some accumulation of Bitcoin in order to kind of do a sell-off.
Yeah, it's a bull trap.
Yep.
It's a bull trap. And for those of you that are new to the market, this actually happens. This actually used to happen even before futures were implemented with Bitcoin. Essentially what market makers would do they would buy during these consolidation periods. They would watch the price of Bitcoin go up in value, and then they would sell at the top and short. And then there would be another accumulation period where they would buy. They would watch it rise a little bit, and then the price would drop even more and they would short it. And it's been seen everywhere in the Bitcoin market for a very long time. Like, you can take a look at some of the old charts from back in 2014, 2015, 2016. It has always been the case. So what these banks are doing essentially, and again, this is all speculation, is nothing new in this marketplace. People that have a lot of money in the Bitcoin market, in the crypto market, have been doing the same exact thing on margin trading exchanges like Poloniex, like Bitfinex. People have been doing that. So it's nothing new. It's nothing that we haven't seen before, but because it's on such a larger scale, you have more people panicking and selling.
Yeah, and you have so many new people in this space that just they're not going to be comfortable with this. How many people bought when it was above 15,000? There was a lot of volume above 15,000.
Absolutely.
So there's people who have bought and have been holding, and over the next year that might totally pan out fine for them. I am long term very positive on cryptocurrencies, but in the very immediate short term, I'm not very optimistic.
So let's take a look at this chart of the futures. This is on the CME Group's website, taking a look at their futures contracts. KJ and I were looking at this together earlier. As you can see, the Bitcoin futures contracts started out at over $20,000. They started at about $20,600. And so if you take a look at that and see where it's currently located on this chart, it's around $11,430. Now, you take a look at the contracts themselves. If each contract has 5 Bitcoin in each specific contract, that's almost $50,000 in profit if you've shorted the market. And again, if this is consolidation right now so that they can buy up some Bitcoin and sell it off and create another panic over the next week, we're going to see even lower lows, and that will create more revenue for these people that are shorting these futures and have been shorting these futures. So essentially what it means to short the market is they buy up these contracts and immediately sell at the very top. So if they had sold at the very top, they would have sold and essentially said, all right, I'm selling these for $20,600 a piece. They buy back in at the very bottom. Let's say it reaches $9,000 by the time this future contract close. Then that is over $11,000 in profit per Bitcoin. So that would be $55,000 total for a single contract in revenue, because once the contract closes, they pay out based on the current value of that asset. Did I explain that? I'm trying to think. Did I screw that up?
Nope, I don't. Basically, if you whichever side buy or sell you're on of that contract, you essentially have to pay the difference at the time of settlement. So if you bought a contract at $20,000 and it goes to $25,000, well then you just made $5,000 per Bitcoin of that contract. And then same if you sold a contract at $20,000 and it goes, if you sold a contract at $20,000 and it goes to $25,000, at the end of that contract you have to cash settle for that $25,000, so you've lost $5,000. So it's just, there's two sides of each of these contracts, and one is betting that it's going to go up and the other is betting it's going to go down. And it's purely just a pure market of, at this date I think the price of Bitcoin is going to be $20,000, and then it's like where it goes from there.
So do you know what the longest contract is right now for Bitcoin futures?
Just a month. Both exchanges are just 1 month, but okay. You can buy them further into the future. So like, we're looking at just the January one. If you click the little blue X on that and close it, you'll see you've got February 2018 futures. I think they do 4 months in advance. CME does.
Okay. Yep. It goes all the way into June. So yeah. So you could essentially buy the next set of futures after Friday, once these close, and say that I'm going to be going long on Bitcoin, meaning that you think that the value of Bitcoin is going to go up over time. And so at the end of each month, when these contracts close, you basically just either pay the difference of what you lost, or you earn revenue based on the value of that specific market if it's gone up. So right now, in my opinion, I think it would be good to go long on Bitcoin, just based on the current value of it and where I think it's going to be in the next year. I think Bitcoin has a lot of potential to do great things, especially with the Lightning Network coming out soon. There is just so much upside potential for Bitcoin, and I think right now the banks are just trying to push the value down as much as possible so that they can get as many Bitcoin in their inventory as possible.
I mean, one other thing to just quickly discuss is the idea that it just happened by just circumstance, or maybe not. Maybe there was manipulation to drive the price up so that the futures would open at a high point. That's another thing to consider too, right? But it just happened to be that the peak of Bitcoin price was right as these Bitcoin futures were coming online. So it was almost like it went online at the market top. And then just naturally, you're going to have some pullback usually from an all-time high, right? Like typically.
Right.
And so all of a sudden you have this perfect storm of futures came online at the height of Bitcoin's price or near it. And so there wasn't much. If you were already skeptical of Bitcoin, like a lot of banks were, here was a perfect chance for you to just jump on and say, yeah, I think the price is going to go lower.
Absolutely. Not only that, there's just been so much other like FUD and FOMO in the market that has driven the price down as well. Like everything that's going on with China and Korea right now, BitConnect, like destroying part of the market itself, taking everybody's Bitcoin and issuing out bullshit coins. There's just been so much over the past week that has just helped drive the price even lower. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest portion of it all is market manipulation. I really do.
Yeah, I would agree. There was an insane incentive to start trying to casually get out of your positions in actual Bitcoin to push the price down if you've bought a short on the futures at near $20,000.
Absolutely. It makes sense to me. It's exactly what I would do. So, like, based on that information alone, are you personally planning on shorting or manipulating these futures for profit at all? Are you thinking about like buying into either of these futures yourself?
I'm not currently. However, I will say I think that with the idea that maybe 1 or 2 months of this and then they'll flip and now we'll see like things, futures opening around, 8,000, whatever. And then if you're excited about where the price of Bitcoin will be in the future, well, then you can go long on these contracts and bet that the price will go up and you don't even have to buy a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to talk about. So this all sounds super negative on futures, right? But there is a positive reason for having futures in a market, and that is to hedge against the downside. And we kind of talked about this before the stream started, and I just brought up the point that one of the biggest, when this was first announced, one of the prime examples of people who would really benefit from futures would be miners.
Oh, yeah.
Because miners, the only way they make lots of money is if the price of Bitcoin goes up. But now if the price of Bitcoin is going down, they're just constantly losing money, right? Or, they're not maximizing profit. With a futures market, they could hedge against Bitcoin's price going down in that they could simultaneously open a short in the futures market while also mining Bitcoin, and it minimizes their risk.
Absolutely. It makes complete sense to me that miners, of all people, especially if they're miners that are using the profit that they receive from mining to pay their bills.
Absolutely.
The people that are mining to hold or hodl, those people are less likely to partake in these futures because they're holding long. They're thinking that in the long term Bitcoin is just going to go up in value. But the people that actually, pay all of their bills and live off of their income from mining Bitcoin, it makes more sense for them to buy into these futures because they literally can be on either side of the playing field. It makes a lot of sense to me to do that. And again, if I was a miner, I would do that as well.
Right. And if there's one thing that's sure, you have to have miners in the system, right?
Yeah.
So it's good that they get some protection that's not just, I'm going to accumulate Bitcoins and hope that the price goes up.
Absolutely. Okay. So this is my last question. And then I'm going to move on to Q&A with everybody in the audience. And then after that, I'm going to do the Bitcoin giveaway that I do every week. But here's my last question for you, KJ. What do you think the long-term effects will be on the crypto market due to this speculative manipulation of the market itself?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure.
Okay.
However, I think that I know that this last week isn't a good example, but I think long term, this does provide some semblance of reining in the crazy 60% swings or whatever in like 2 days. I think these last few weeks has been a really bad example of that, but I don't know. That's kind of my take, is that from everything I've read, people talk about futures markets as bringing some stability to a commodity. And I just think that longer term, futures will do that. Only based on other things I've read. This is not something I've come up with. It's just what I've read about futures markets.
No, absolutely. I'm actually in the same boat, man. I completely agree. I think that over time, we're going to see the market go up in value because of these futures contracts. Because I spoke about this last week, the gold futures, that their chart looks identical to Bitcoin's futures chart. And over time, gold has gone up dramatically in value. However, when futures were first introduced, the price of gold dropped. It plummeted the same way that Bitcoin has. And I think there was a consolidation period where banks were trying to get their hands on as much gold, as much physical gold as possible, so that they could essentially gain as much profit as possible over time. They knew that if they held long by driving the price down first originally, that they could make more money over time. And I think that that is exactly what's happening right now. I think banks are trying to get their hands on as much Bitcoin as possible. I really, really do. I think they're trying to just scoop up as much cheap coins as they possibly can, so that over time they can make more money in the long run.
Yeah, and along that line, one of the weird revelations I've had that just struck me as so counterintuitive, but it's so important to me as a trader, was starting to see on the day, like on Monday and Tuesday, when the market was really dropping, and you saw tons of what everyone refers to as sell volume. The vital thing to remember is that all of that volume has a buyer on the other side of it.
Yep.
And to me, that is such a sign that big players accumulated tons of Bitcoin on Monday and Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Because the small guys don't have the capacity to buy up that level of volume of those sell-offs. It's such an important concept, at least to me, is to view those big volume sell-offs as big volume buys.
For sure. That's exactly what's happening. Because, like, and thank you for mentioning that. It's important to always look at the volume in the market. So whenever these giant sell-offs occur and people are panic selling, look at the volume. Look and see just how much is being sold. Because like KJ said, it's not necessarily about how much is being sold, but how much is actually being purchased at that time. And is it all one order? Take a look at like the size of some of these orders at times. Because if you see somebody buying, 10, 20 Bitcoin at a time, there's a good chance that that person has a lot of money, or it's not a person at all. And it's actually an entity like a bank. So keep an eye on those things, guys. Everything that we're saying, it's not financial advice, but we're offering some really, really good tips for trading right now, by the way. We can't tell you guys what to do with your money because that would be financial advice, but some of the things that we're mentioning right now are excellent trading tips to keep an eye on. Okay, KJ, I would just like to say thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight. I really appreciate all of your input. I always appreciate all of your input. For those of you that are new to my channel, I have a Discord server, and KJ is actually one of the moderators in my Discord server. He's been in the crypto space for quite a while now himself, and he's pretty educated on a lot of these projects that are currently going on in the market. So he gives a lot of really awesome advice in my Discord server, and has a lot of great input. So thank you again, KJ, for coming on the show tonight.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for fostering such a good community that always seems to have fantastic questions.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move into the Q&A now, guys, that I always do on my Friday Night Live. I'm going to move into Q&A, guys, so that you guys can ask any questions that you might have about anything. And as long as I have an answer, I'll respond. But if I don't know, I'm going to let you guys know up front. I don't know about that specific topic, and I don't want to give my opinion on it just because I don't have any knowledge on it, and I don't ever want to spread misinformation. That's something that I've always prided my channel on, giving good information as much as I know possible. So let's move into Q&A now, and then after that we'll do the Bitcoin giveaway. All right. Just wanted to say this channel is one of the few legit channels that just try to educate and advance the crypto society. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Why play the game? Because it's fun. Someone put a bounty on BitConnect Director, $1,000. Check it out. Okay. Clay and KJ, if decentralized exchanges really take off and take over, do you think that would help to prevent this kind of manipulation or enhance it as trading speed increases? Honestly, I don't think it will have any effect on market manipulation, because as long as this market is unregulated, that's really what it boils down to. It doesn't matter what the medium for exchanging is. It just matters about the fact that this market is completely unregulated and it's the Wild West.
In my opinion, just really quick.
What's up, dude?
Even regulated markets, they always are going to have market makers. There's always going to be a big fish out there with lots of whatever you're trying to trade, holding it. And if they decide to sell or they decide to buy a bunch, you're just at the whim of them. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What is Bitcoin Cash? Okay, Noah, Bitcoin Cash is basically a hard fork of Bitcoin. Um, there was a debate that was going on for about 2 years, and there were two sides of the aisle. You had the people that wanted larger block sizes, and then you had people that wanted to implement segregated witness and the Lightning Network. Now, with these larger block sizes, it would mean that you had to download more more uh, more megabytes per block, which would mean that the blockchain itself would get larger and larger as time went on. However, it would speed up the transaction speeds in the short term, because with more size in each block, you can fit more transactions. So you had these people over here that just wanted to raise the block sizes, which were the Bitcoin Cash people. And then you had these people over here that wanted to integrate new technology and essentially make the blockchain itself better. And those are the people known as Bitcoin Core, or Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash is basically just a red-headed stepchild of Bitcoin itself. And for anybody that tells you anything different, I would just have to disagree with them entirely. And it's all ideological. It's nothing that... There's no rule book anywhere that says this is the real Bitcoin and this isn't. But me personally, I will never accept Bitcoin Cash as the real Bitcoin. Bitcoin is whatever the market decides Bitcoin is. And so far, that has been Bitcoin with segregated witness and the Lightning Network. What do you trade into if you're trying to time this short? US dollars, another crypto. So yeah, if you wanted to hedge and just get out of the market so that you could wait for that dip to buy more, I would definitely just go into US dollars, like on a platform like GDAX. If you're trying to short, you would have to go on an exchange that allows margin trading. And the only one that I can think of here in the US is Poloniex, and I don't really trust that exchange, so I don't really do any margin trading. How was your first month on Hashflare? Did you reinvest? I definitely have been reinvesting all month, but I don't know if I'm going to do it anymore. I think I'm just going to start taking my profits now. It's been decent, but because of the value of Bitcoin going down, my daily profits have been going down as well. However, I plan on holding those long, and anything that I get as far as cloud mining goes, I'm just going to hold on to it. I'm sending all of that money to a hardware wallet of mine. What part of the US are you from? I actually live in Nebraska. Scams are bad, my G. Yes, they are. Is NEM a good investment? Honestly, I think it has its perks, but it's been around for a while, and it just hasn't... I really feel like they haven't marketed it very well. It has so much potential to do a lot of things. The marketplace on NEM is really, really cool, but I feel like they haven't marketed it well enough, because if they had, it really has the potential to be like the next eBay, and I don't say something like that very lightly. It really, really has a good use case, but nobody knows about it, man. Yeah, I'm not gonna promote that that YouTube link, man. I'm sorry. BCH equals quick fix bullshit. Bitcoin people, real solution. Yeah. Wasn't the purpose of Bitcoin to stop manipulation and quantitative easing, which caused the crash of late 2008? Why go back? History shows that government intervention always causes manipulation. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely correct. That's why it was created. Did you do any bad trades in the past that still haunts you to this day? What did you learn from them? Of course I have, man. Honestly, one of the worst trades I've ever made was in 2017. One of the worst trades I ever made. I sold a bunch of my EOS that I had bought in their ICO, and then 2 days later, or maybe it wasn't 2 days, it was shortly after, the price of EOS went from $1 to like $10, and I sold off right before that. Now, did I make a profit? Yes, but if I had just held on for a little bit longer, I would have made a considerable amount of money on that trade alone. And so that was definitely one of my worst trades that I have made ever, hands down. Do you know anything about internet node token? I don't know enough, man. I'm sorry. Last week you said you were previously in the Air Force. I am currently in. Have any quick stories to tell? Let me think. Okay, yeah, this one is actually a cool story. So, for those of you that don't know, flyers in the Air Force, whenever they deploy to combat areas, they like to take the American flag with them and fly it on the aircraft. Well, I just so happened to have been in Iraq and Afghanistan for both Operation Inherent Resolve and Operation Enduring Freedom. So I actually have a flag here at my house that I flew on the aircraft with us on missions both in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that is one of the most cherished items that I have in my house. Being in the Air Force and serving was always something that was really great for me. But doing my job and actually deploying was one of the greatest feelings of accomplishment that I've ever had in my life. So I don't want to get into too many details of my job or anything like that, but yeah, that's a cool little story. Let's see. The movie Trading Places comes to mind. Yeah, for sure. Nice to see you, Clay. Thanks, man. It's about finding him and reporting him to the FBI authorities. Okay. I believe you, man. I just don't want to post anything like that on my channel. Are you going to invest in some ICO this year? Maybe the Telegram ICO or Nex? I actually might invest in the decentralized exchange for Neo. Yeah, absolutely. I might do that. It looks really, really promising. I accidentally bought a bunch of Flick the other day and then tried to sell it because it was a mistake, then couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted it, so I kept it. Oh, that's good, man. That's hilarious. Cool coin. Just hold on to it, man. You have no idea what could happen over the next year or two with it. Just shit, man. Just hold long. Go for it. Any ICO you would recommend? I actually don't make any financial recommendations, man. That's not what my channel is about. I can tell you what I invest in, but I try to stay away from giving any actual financial advice, my man. Can you please make the public announcement that it is not safe to eat Tide Pods? Apparently that's a thing now. Okay, guys. Don't eat Tide Pods. Clay, I bet you couldn't wait to grow a beard when you got out of the Air Force. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Hey, Clay, I completely supporting you taking this full time. You're awesome at it. What's your personal Bitcoin price prediction by the end of 2018? Personal opinion, not financial advice, of course. So I actually was listening to an interview with Tom Lee, which was one of the first banker investors to invest in Bitcoin, and I respect a lot of his work. And I was listening to what he had to say, and he thinks that Bitcoin is going to reach around $25,000 by the end of this year. I think that that's a really conservative estimate, and I think he's probably close to being on track with that. I was saying maybe around 30,000, 10,000 above its all-time high, is what we could see by the end of 2018. But again, yeah, that's not financial advice. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah, personally super interested in that decentralized exchange on Neo. It looks really promising, man. Salute, bro. Salute. Hell yeah. Wouldn't it be funny if Flick went to the moon? What a great mistake that'd be. Hell yeah, dude. It happens all the time. You think people buying Bitcoin back in 2010 thought they were going to be millionaires? I don't think so. Maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe some of them, came back in a time machine or something. Alright guys, we are at the end of my live stream, so you guys know what time it is. It is time to do the Bitcoin giveaway. Every Friday night I give away $25 worth of Bitcoin. Please have your Bitcoin wallets readily available so that you can give me your address once I pick a winner. Alright, let's see what Nightbot has to say tonight. All right. Nice. Adilos. I don't even know how to say that, man. You'd have to tell me how to pronounce that. But yeah, congratulations. You win $25 worth of Bitcoin. So just go ahead and post your wallet address in the chat box, and I will go ahead and send you $25 worth of Bitcoin. I really would appreciate a sub though, man. You definitely just won 25 bucks off of me. That'd be sweet. Yeah, for everybody else, thank you so much for watching the live stream tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that KJ and I had. I really appreciated it. I learned quite a bit just from studying up on this specific topic. So, yeah, I always appreciate all of you for joining in on the live streams. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed tonight's video, and if you've watched some of my other videos and you haven't subbed yet, please hit that sub button. It helps me out so that I can grow my channel and help build, a bigger and better community that is supportive to new users, that tries to teach and educate and not put people down. That's not what we're here about at Crypto Market Investments. So please help me out by hitting that like and subscribe button. I always appreciate all of you. Yeah, Adalizos, just go ahead and post your public address. Alrighty. That's going to be it for today, guys. Crypto Clay out.